Can you feel the burn? That is what supporters for Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders are saying as he picks up momentum. His events across the country are bringing in thousands, and he's been gaining ground in the polls, overtaking Hillary Clinton in early voting states such as Iowa and New Hampshire.
Sanders' platform, solving income inequality through free college, universal health care, and paid family leave, which, according to one estimate, could cost up to $18 trillion. The spotlight is on. The 74-year-old was on the cover of Time magazine this week. And Senator Bernie Sanders is here with us now on set. Senator, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
First, I want to get to something that is in the news this morning, and that is something that a supporter of Donald Trump said last night. He talked about the problem in this country, he said, is Muslims, and he said the president is one of them. I'm wondering, he also said he's not even an American. I'm wondering what your reaction is to that.
I think it's pathetic. Donald Trump, as you know, was in fact one of the leaders of the so-called birther movement, questioning whether or not the president was born in the United States of America. I think it's time we got beyond that. It's time we ended racism in this country. My father came from Poland. No one asked for my birth certificate. The president of the United States was born in Hawaii. He's an American, and I really am tired of these attacks.
Think Donald Trump should have corrected him?
Absolutely, absolutely.
It does serve as a contrast to Senator John McCain when he was asked that very same question back in 2008 when he was running against President Obama. And earlier this week, Vice President Joe Biden called this message sick, this pandering to xenophobia. You clearly agree with the Vice President.
Yeah, I do. Look, we got real problems in this country. You know what they are? For the last 40 years, the middle class of this country is disappearing. We have massive wealth and inequality. Almost all of the new income and wealth is going to the top 1%. According to the scientific community, climate change is one of the great global crises that we face. And if we don't get our act together, the planet we're going to be leaving our kids is not going to be in particularly good shape. We have a campaign finance system which is corrupt. It allows billionaires to buy elections. We got millions of families struggling to send their kids to college. We need to address the issues of racial justice. Those are the issues that we should be dealing with. Immigration is an issue. How do we provide a path towards citizenship, in my view, through comprehensive immigration reform? Let's discuss those issues. Let's stop the racism. Let's stop the xenophobia. Let's focus on the real issues impacting the American people.
Senator, I'd like to ask you about the political landscape. Donald Trump, as you well know, has been leading in the polls. Ben Carson is in second place. You also have seen this surge, and you all have this outsider appeal. Does that surprise you? And what does that say to you about what it is the American people are looking for in their political leadership?
Well, I think what the American people are looking for is a solution to understand why, despite an explosion of technology, they are working longer hours for lower wages. They are trying to understand why it is that the top 1/10 of 1% now have almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. They are trying to understand why we are the only major country on earth that does not provide paid family and medical leave or provide health care to all people as a right. In other words, what they are saying, why in this great country do so few have so much and so many have so little? Why do we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth? Those are the questions that I think many of my supporters want answers to. Those are the issues we're working on. I want to get back to a point that you made. Wall Street Journal the other day said that my proposal was going to spend $18 trillion. They're wrong. It was inadequate. That is what the Wall Street Journal does. The fact of the matter is, yeah, we're going to spend $1 trillion to rebuild our infrastructure and create 13 million jobs. Yes, we are going to expand and extend Social Security by lifting the cap on taxable income. But in terms of health care, I hope everybody understands that we are the only major country on earth that doesn't guarantee health care to all people through a national health care program. What the Wall Street Journal forgot to say is that this proposal would eliminate the need for people to pay private health insurance. So at the end of the day, people would be paying less for health care than they pay today.
Senator, you talk about these issues that are facing the American people. You've been in the Senate since 2007. You were in the Congress before that. You caucus with the Democrats. Why haven't you in Washington been able to fix those problems, even though people consider you an outsider? You've been in D.C. for quite a while.
You really think that one United States senator could do it all alone? I think if you look at my record, it is the record of perhaps being the most progressive member of the United States Senate. But we have a little bit of a problem. That right now we have, among other things, the House and the Senate controlled by right-wing Republicans who believe that their job is to give more tax breaks to billionaires, not to provide health care to more people, but to throw people off of health care, make it harder for young people to go to college, make it harder for working families to feed their kids. And what I have said, by the way, to answer your question, I believe that no president, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can do all the things that have to be done to protect the middle class of this country. We need what I call a political revolution. Millions of people coming together to take on the billionaire class, which today has so much wealth and power.
That political revolution you talk about, a lot of political analysts say there was a revolution as well with the Republicans back when Ronald Reagan became president. All of a sudden, people in the middle class, who for many years, their issues had been championed by the Democratic Party, all of a sudden saw themselves very much in a position that the Republicans were able to appeal with. In other words, they are putting forth proposals that enable businesses, but not necessarily the middle class, according to you. And somehow the middle class sees them align with those interests.
Well,
Why is that?
That's right. Well, let me tell you this. I am the ranking member on the Budget Committee. That means the leader of the Democratic opposition. And check it out, because I'm telling you the truth. People will think I'm not. I'm being partisan. This is what the Republican budget was. Threw 27 million people off of health insurance by repealing the Affordable Care Act and cutting Medicaid. Cut Pell Grants by $90 billion over 10 years, making it harder for kids to go to college. And at a time when millions of families are struggling to put food on the table, massive cuts in nutrition programs. And then they gave over $250 billion in tax breaks to the top 0.2%. That's the truth. Now, whose agenda is that? Do you think that's a middle-class agenda? Do you think that's a working-class agenda? That is the agenda of the billionaire class, the class that funds much of what the Republican Party does.
Senator, getting back to your own agenda, I think a lot of people are wondering when it is that they will hear specifics on plans to pay for some of these things.
Well, they've already heard a lot of specifics. We have a pretty clear, and we need to honestly, we need to be more specific. But we have some very specific proposals. For example, we have a proposal that would, in fact, pay for free tuition at public colleges and universities. We pay for it by a tax on Wall Street speculation. We pay for the expansion and extension of Social Security benefits by lifting the cap on taxable income starting at $250,000. In my view, at a time when we have massive wealth and income inequality, when almost all of the new wealth and income is going to the top 1%, yes, those people are going to have to pay more in taxes.
Senator, getting back to the race, Secretary Clinton has been struggling in the polls of late, and recently her super PAC sent out an email comparing you to British Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn, a committed socialist, and the email suggested that he be friendly with terrorist organizations. Right. What do you make of that kind of attack?
I think it's pathetic, and I think it's what old-fashioned politics is about. You know, what you do is, I'm sure you meet a lot of people, and we say, well, you met that person, therefore you must agree with all of their views. Everybody knows that's politics at its worst. And let me tell you something. We send out an email to our supporters, and we said, send a message to David Brock of this super PAC and tell him how you feel about it. We've raised over $1.2 million from tens of thousands of people in a 48-hour period who said, no, we don't want to see that kind of negative advertising. Look, what I believe in, people in a democracy disagree. You disagree with me, fine. Here's the issue. What's your view? Here's my view. Let's argue it out. But let's not go around saying, well, you met somebody, or you talked to somebody whose views were something, therefore that is what you are. That's old-fashioned negative politics, and I hope we can get beyond it.
Should Secretary Clinton apologize?
Well, at least David Brock should apologize. Her super PAC should apologize, yes.
I just want to ask one last question, sorry, Elaine, about Black Lives Matter, because it's they've interrupted some of your campaign rallies. You met with them recently.
I've met with them on more than one occasion, yes.
But just recently, 2 days ago or 3 days ago, they have some serious grievances when it comes to police brutality in this country. We've watched the Republican debates not touched on in the last one.
Not one word.
And now, so you've met with them. A lot of people have criticized them. You have been a champion of civil rights for a long time. They came to your rallies. They made a commotion. What are they saying to you? What are you hoping to do, should you become president of the United States, to affect change when it comes to police brutality?
The issues they are raising are very, very real. They are issues that we have got to address. Nobody in America, I hope, finds it acceptable that unarmed African Americans are getting killed in police custody. And I'm a former mayor. I've worked with my police department. I know police officers all over the country. Vast majority of them are hardworking, honest, trying to do a very difficult job. But if a police officer breaks the law, that officer must be held accountable. We have more people in jail than any other country on earth, more than in China. We need real criminal justice reform. We need to figure out why so many people are going to jail. We need to take a look at mandatory minimum sentences. We need to make sure that people who are non-violent do not necessarily spend time in jail. We need to develop a path out of jail back to civil society rather than have the kind of recidivism rates that we have right now. There's an enormous amount of work that has to be done. And bottom line is, I think a lot of the points they are making are very important points and real points.
President Obama has tried to tackle some of those very things that you've mentioned. And if he, as the nation's first African-American president, hasn't been able to successfully quell some of the tension between law enforcement and minority communities, what would you, Senator Sanders, be able to do, President Sanders be able to do to help?
I'm not suggesting this is an easy issue. And you're right, the president has tried. I think we need to do a couple of things. I mean, as Americans, we've got to go into our hearts, and we've got to do everything that we can to combat what we call institutional racism, okay? But the second thing we need to do is real criminal justice reform. For example, just yesterday, I've introduced legislation that would get private corporations out of running jails, okay? I don't think that people should be making profit by seeing more and more people go into jail. But there's a lot more that has to be done. The bottom line is that when we have more people in jail than any other country, we got a lot of work to do. To make sure that our young people do not end up in jail. I'll give you one example. Real unemployment for African-American young people in this country today, 51%. 51%. We have to address that issue.
And it's increasing.
And it's increasing. So I would rather invest in education. I don't want kids to be dropping out of school. Yes, it will cost money to keep those kids in school, but from a human point of view and a financial point of view, makes more sense to invest in those kids, keeping them in jail, rather than keeping them out of jail, putting money into jobs and education rather than paying for a jail. Education is cheaper than jails, by the way.